The ocean is a dark abyss filled with secrets that we still do not fully understand. Beneath its silent surface lie fragments of history, unknown creatures, and findings that seem taken from a legend or a nightmare. Over time, sailors, divers, and scientists have found things so strange that, to this day, many remain unexplained. So, get comfortable and turn off the lights, because these are 7 mysterious objects found at the bottom of the sea. How are you? Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Let's begin. The Golden Orb of the Pacific. In 2023, in the abyssal depths of the Gulf of Alaska, about 3,300 meters below the surface, a team of explorers encountered something no one expected. The cameras of the robotic vehicle Deep Discoverer recorded a bright, rounded object attached to a rocky mound. The shimmering form stood out in the marine gloom. The surprised scientists stopped the ROV, remotely operated vehicle, to focus better. What they saw seemed almost organic. A dull, gold-colored globe with a smooth surface, with a texture that looked like skin. It measured about 10 centimeters in diameter and was dome-shaped, strangely resembling a melted hat. But most unsettling was a small hole or tear near its base, a perfectly rounded hole suggesting that something might have entered or exited its interior. The find left everyone on board and the live audience watching the expedition online bewildered. As the Golden Orb appeared on the screens, one researcher couldn't help but comment in a nervous tone, "This is like the beginning of a horror movie." The phrase echoed in the communication, underlining the atmosphere of astonishment and apprehension. With great care, they maneuvered the ROV's robotic arm to touch it. The surface was delicate, feeling like silk or a very fine membrane, and it adhered slightly to the rock. When they tried to pick it up, they verified its fragility. Under slight mechanical pressure, the object detached from the bottom. The golden sphere was lifted with extreme care and suctioned into a special container, a small, transparent chamber to be taken to the surface. The lack of clear structures, no letters, eyes, or distinguishable parts tilted the hypothesis toward it being a giant egg. However, none of the scientists had ever seen an egg like that before. Once aboard the ship, with the mysterious object in the gloved hands of the experts, the uncertainty grew. The golden egg, as it was dubbed, showed no immediate signs of life inside. It felt soft but firm, flexible yet resistant, as if it were a casing for something. As samples were taken in the floating laboratory, Sam Candio, a member of NOAA Ocean Exploration, stated, "As much as it humbles us to be stumped by this finding, it is a reminder of how little we know about our own planet and how much there is left to learn and appreciate about the ocean." Scientists now plan to analyze the object's genetics in a lab to unravel its origin. The main theories suggest it could be the casing of an egg from an unknown marine species, or perhaps the remains of a previously unclassified sponge. Whatever the result, the image of the Golden Orb with its enigmatic hole is quite intriguing. After all, the ocean has not yet revealed all its secrets, and at findings like this, we can only marvel and perhaps shudder a little. The corpse of the Zuiyo Maru. In the early hours of the 25th of April, 1977, the crew of the Japanese fishing trawler Zuiyo Maru was fishing peacefully about 30 miles off the coast of New Zealand, near Christchurch, when something unimaginable became trapped in their nets. The sailors suddenly felt a massive weight and an unusual jolt beneath the waves. As they slowly pulled the nets up from 300 meters deep, a strange and gigantic figure emerged. An inert body that was definitely not a fish or a whale. It was nothing they knew. When that flaccid, foul-smelling mass appeared through the foam, many took a step back. It looked like a sea monster, a mythological creature with a 1.5-meter neck, 4 reddish fins, and a mangled tail. It was nearly 10 meters long and weighed approximately 1.8 tons, but it was in an advanced state of decomposition. Its head lacked eyes, and part of its lower jaw was missing. It also emitted an unbearable stench. The astonished fishermen went as far as to think, given the creature's shape, that they had pulled the corpse of a plesiosaur from the abyss, a prehistoric marine reptile that science says went extinct about 65 million years ago. The captain, Akira Tanaka, then faced a dilemma. He knew the corpse could ruin the day's catch with its stench and potential bacteria, but he also understood it could be a biological and scientific discovery never seen before. After some discussion, Tanaka finally decided to throw the body back into the sea to avoid spoiling the commercial cargo. However, before disposing of it, the sailors acted quickly. They took photographs of this strange being, measured its proportions as best they could, and even cut off small fragments of its tissue, bones, and fins to preserve them in brine. They affectionately nicknamed the creature Nessie, in honor of the legendary Loch Ness monster, aware that they had just thrown overboard what could be the only proof of such a monster. When the news reached Japan, what the media called plesiosaur mania broke out. The idea that a plesiosaur, or at least its remains, had been found in the modern era ignited the public's and many scientists' imaginations. The fishing company, owner of the Zuiyo Maru, ordered all its ships to try to locate the discarded corpse, but it was in vain. Soon, prominent zoologists and paleontologists appeared on television debating the true nature of that strange sea monster. Yoshinori Imaizumi of the National Museum of Nature and Science in Tokyo declared after seeing the photos that it didn't look like a fish or a mammal, but almost certainly a giant marine reptile. Tokyo Shikama, a professor at Yokohama University, agreed that the photos showed something very similar to a plesiosaur. With these respectable opinions, the theory that a marine dinosaur had surfaced off New Zealand gained even more strength. In July 1977, a press conference was organized to formally announce this finding to the world, even though the tissue analyses were not yet ready. Newspapers and news programs talked about this discovery constantly, and all kinds of souvenirs were produced, from t-shirts to models, celebrating the possibility that Nessie had a cousin in the Pacific. However, outside of Japan, many experts received the news with more skepticism. Western marine biologists pointed out that this was not the first time a strange marine corpse had been mistaken for prehistoric creatures. In fact, scientists in New Zealand and Europe warned that basking sharks, when decomposing, quickly lose the lower part of the head, gills, and dorsal and caudal fins, thus acquiring an elongated silhouette that resembles that of a plesiosaur. The rampant speculation needed to be confronted with real data. Fortunately, the tissue and fiber fragments the sailors had collected provided the key. Several laboratories in Japan performed advanced biochemical analyses, including amino acid chromatography, to compare that rotting flesh with known species. The scientific verdict finally arrived on the 25th of July, 1977. The remains belonged, without a doubt, to a decomposing basking shark. The creature, as terrifying as it looked, was not a Mesozoic monster, but the bloated corpse of one of the largest fish in the current sea. The tests revealed the presence of elastoidin, a protein found in shark cartilage, and the absence of bone structures that should exist in a reptile. Despite the conclusiveness of the tests, the legend of the modern plesiosaur persisted in certain circles. In Japan, the euphoria took time to calm down, and the government even issued a commemorative postage stamp in November 1977 of the supposed plesiosaur, celebrating the find. Some paranormal enthusiasts hinted at a scientific cover-up. Over time, however, the basking shark explanation was widely accepted by the academic community. To this day, those photographs of a strange creature hanging from the crane of a fishing boat, with its hanging skin and eerie appearance, remain deeply unsettling to anyone who doesn't know the story. The Baltic Sea Anomaly. In the summer of 2011, the cold Baltic Sea became the setting for one of the most discussed geological mysteries of the decade. A Swedish shipwreck exploration group known as Ocean X Team was dragging the bottom of the Baltic between Sweden and Finland when their instruments detected something unusual. On the side-scan sonar screens, the silhouette of a circular, enormous object appeared where there was supposed to be only mud and rocks. At about 91 meters deep, the sensors outlined a rounded formation of approximately 60 meters in diameter with notably symmetrical contours. To add to the intrigue, this shape was at the end of a kind of flat stretch of seabed, as if it had left a trail or landing strip of nearly 300 meters behind it. Soon, the grainy black and white image began to be compared to something out of science fiction. Many said it reminded them of the iconic Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. The discovery, quickly dubbed by the press as the Baltic Sea Anomaly, sparked a wave of speculation about its origin. The divers from Ocean X Team, led by Peter Lindbergh and Dennis Osberg, made several dives to inspect this strange structure directly. And what they saw in the murky waters was just as disconcerting. The rock formation had rounded, stepped edges, rising about 3 to 4 meters above the surrounding seabed, with the appearance of a gigantic stone mushroom or an oval platform. On the other hand, The surface seemed unusually smooth in some parts and presented curious straight edges and angles of up to 90 degrees details that fueled the idea that it was an artificial object. They even reported the existence of something like steps or terraces leading to the top of the structure, as if they were ancient submerged ruins. To add a more mysterious tint, the team claimed that as they approached the anomaly, their electrical equipment began to fail. Cameras, satellite phones, and even the sonar system suffered inexplicable interference, forcing them to maintain a certain distance. In a short time, social media was filled with theories. Some proposed it could be one of the famous flying saucers that had been sunk, noting that during World War II, the Baltic was a site of naval operations. Others suggested an artifact of extraterrestrial origin, a kind of alien ship that may have crashed into the sea thousands of years ago and remained buried in sediment. There were also those who thought of human construction from a glacial era. As the media fever grew, scientists around the world began to express caution. Marine geologists pointed out that the Baltic floor has been shaped by successive glaciations, and it would not be surprising to find rock formations that were the product of natural processes, no matter how curious they might seem. Still, it took several years to get clearer answers. OceanX team extracted small rock samples from the anomaly and the surrounding area, which were analyzed by independent experts. The results, finally published, dismantled the most fantastic hypotheses, as this anomaly was composed of common and ordinary rocks from the region. Professor Volker Bruscher, a geologist at Stockholm University, confirmed the presence of granite, gneiss, a type of metamorphic rock, and sandstone in the sample's material typical of areas affected by the passage of ancient glaciers. In one of the pieces, basalt was identified, a volcanic rock that, although it does not coincide with local volcanic activity, since the Baltic is not currently a volcanic zone, could have been dragged by ice from other latitudes during the glacial era. Given that the entire northern Baltic is heavily influenced by glacial melting processes, both the structure and the samples were probably formed in that context, explained Bruscher, noting that massive ice sheets could have transported and deposited those rocks there thousands of years ago. The explanation for the peculiar shape was that the original sonar image was low resolution, creating blurry contours that the human brain tended to reinterpret as something symmetrical and known. In reality, it would be a kind of heap of glacial rocks grouped together and eroded into rounded shapes over time. Of course, even with this entire geological explanation on the table, the Baltic anomaly did not lose its aura completely. And that is because although for science this mystery is already solved with the simplest answer that it is all a work of nature sculpted by ice and time, even today some continue to doubt the official conclusions, citing the supposed electrical failures and the unusual nature of the anomaly's shape. If you are enjoying this content, please do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel, as well as recommend it to a friend or leave a comment, as that would help us a lot. And if you are on a podcast platform, you can also comment, leave 5 stars, or recommend it to whoever you want. Thank you very much. Also, leave a comment if you noticed my voice sounds strange. Yes, it's because I'm a bit sick, but here we are, pushing through. Thank you very much. And now, let's continue with the video. The megalith of the Pantelleria Vecchia Bank. About 60 kilometers south of the island of Sicily, there is a submarine sand and rock bank called Pantelleria Vecchia. In 2015, a team of oceanographers was performing a high-resolution map of the bottom of that area when they detected something singular, unusual linear structures at around 40 meters deep. Intrigued, they sent divers to investigate. What they found seemed like a scene from Atlantis, a massive stone monolith split into 2 large sections that lay on the sandy seabed. Upon inspecting it more closely, they verified that it was a block of sedimentary limestone with an elongated shape about 12 meters in total length, more or less the equivalent of a 4-story building lying down. Calculating its density, it must have easily weighed about 15 tons. But the most striking thing was its holes. The monolith had 3 perforations, a main hole that went through the rock from side to side, a straight and cylindrical tunnel that matched on both fragmented halves, indicating that it had been artificially drilled. 2 other smaller holes appeared on the sides, also of regular shape. That was not a natural formation. Everything pointed to it having been carved by human hands. The scientists, led by oceanographer Emanuele Lodolo and geophysicist Zvi Ben Avraham, were baffled by this discovery. There were many questions in the air. Who, when, and why had they cut, transported, and erected such a megalith only to then simply leave it submerged in the middle of the Strait of Sicily? The first clues came from the nature of the site itself. Today, that monolith is under 40 meters of water, but it wasn't always that way. According to geological data, towards the end of the last glaciation, about 9,500 to 10,000 years ago, the sea level was much lower. In fact, the lands that today make up Pantelleria Vecchia emerged as islands or coastal banks in the middle of the Mediterranean. That is, in the early Mesolithic era, that monolith had been on dry land, on a coast perhaps frequented by human groups of hunter-gatherers. With global melting, the sea rose, swallowing those lands around 7,000 BC, leaving the monolith in its current location. Therefore, any human intervention on that object must have occurred before the waters covered it, probably around 10,000 years ago. The mere estimated antiquity made this monolith a very intriguing piece. Until then, the conventional view was that the Mesolithic societies of the Mediterranean were relatively simple and had not undertaken monumental constructions. But here was evidence of sophisticated work to carve a 1-2 meter long block and section it. Lodolo and his colleagues, after publishing their discovery, speculated that this object could have served as a nautical signal, an ancient coastal lighthouse, or a navigation marker, given that astrolabes or similar devices were invented millennia later. Underwater archaeologists compare this find to Stonehenge because of its importance in rewriting what we know about these societies. If humans 9,000 or 10,000 years ago had the capacity to manipulate such large stones, it means they possessed technical skills more advanced than we assumed for their time, or at least in that region. Some people have linked this finding to the mythical city of Atlantis, given the age and size of the structure. With modern equipment, the monolith has been mapped and photographed, but recovering it would be complex and very expensive. So for now, it rests surrounded by fish and algae, offering a hideout for small marine creatures. And who knows how many other similar objects, constructions, or even entire cities are out there, submerged at the bottom of the sea, without us knowing. The metallic spheres in Papua New Guinea. In another case worthy of science fiction, in June 2023, a scientific expedition went in search of the remains of an interstellar visitor that had fallen into the ocean. The story begins in the early hours of the 8th of January 2014, when an incandescent meteor streaked across the sky over Manus Island in Papua New Guinea and disintegrated over the Bismarck Sea. That event went almost unnoticed at the time, but later, astronomers from Harvard University, including Professor Avi Loeb, analyzed United States government data and reached the extraordinary conclusion that this meteorite, known as IM-1, originated from outside our solar system. It was potentially the first interstellar meteorite identified by humanity. With the firm conviction of finding some fragment of this object, Loeb organized the Galileo expedition in 2023, and armed with a research ship, a powerful magnet, and a lot of determination, they set sail for the coordinates where it was calculated the remains had fallen. This is approximately 85 kilometers north of Papua New Guinea, at the bottom of the South Pacific. This challenge was monumental. Imagining the extent of the ocean and trying to find tiny vestiges of a meteorite sounds simply like madness. But this expedition counted on dispersion models and data from military radars to narrow down the search area, a strip of a few square kilometers under the sea. And so, for 2 weeks, the scientists dragged their special magnet along the bottom at about 2,000 meters deep, hoping to collect any metallic particle coming from space. And finally, on the 20th of June 2023, upon reviewing the content stuck to the magnet, they detected small, bright specks. Upon observing them with a microscope, there they were. Small metallic spheres, many of them with a diameter of less than 1 millimeter, dark gold in color and with a polished surface. In total, about 50 metallic spherules the size of grains of sand were recovered. Some seemed to contain smaller spheres inside, like microscopic Russian dolls, probably formed by the fusion of droplets of metal that later solidified, trapping others inside. These tiny metallic pellets would be, as far as we know, the fragments of an interstellar object that have been rescued from the ocean. The excitement of the researchers after this was palpable. Loeb described the moment when the first member of the team announced the finding of one of the spherules. It was like finding an ant in the kitchen. When you find one, you know there must be many more. And indeed, many appeared in that same sample. They quickly took one of the spheres to the X-ray fluorescence analyzer to determine its chemical composition, and the result increased the mystery, as the spherules were predominantly composed of iron with approximately 8% silicon, 4% magnesium, and 2% titanium, with practically no trace of nickel. This combination, so that everyone can understand, is highly anomalous. Common metallic meteorites usually contain nickel mixed with iron, and industrial alloys manufactured by human beings also usually incorporate nickel or other elements. But these spheres presented that unusual signature of elements. In other words, this was something never seen before. Of course, a preliminary analysis was not definitive. The samples were packaged with extreme care and sent to laboratories for more detailed examinations, including isotopic analyses that could reveal if their origin is interstellar beyond ambiguity. But Loeb already had the hunch of being faced with something extraordinary. He even ventured the possibility that these fragments were not simply natural, but perhaps parts of some technological device that was traveling through space. So far, we have only studied meteorites from our own solar system, so any difference in composition or structure could reveal information about the formation of planets around other stars. In the most intriguing scenario, these spheres could exhibit a purity or microstructure that points to an artificial origin. Let's imagine for a moment that they were fragments of, let's say, the hull of some interstellar probe that traveled for eons until it fell to Earth. This would be, without exaggeration, one of the most important discoveries in human history. The key is to find a macroscopic piece of the original object that has survived the impact, large enough to identify if it is simply rock or some kind of technological apparatus. Bimini Road? In September 1968, off the coast of the island of Bimini in the Bahamas, the diver and submarine pilot Joseph Manson Valentine was flying over some incredibly clear waters in his hydrofoil when he noticed something strange beneath the surface. On the sandy bottom, at barely 5 or 6 meters deep, rows of large, flat blocks arranged with astonishing regularity were visible. Intrigued, he returned the next day with snorkeling gear and confirmed the incredible, stretching out to sea. There appeared to be a paved road under the water. That submarine rocky structure, now known as the Bimini Road or Bimini Wall, consists of an alignment of rectangular and polygonal limestone blocks, placed one after the other in an organized pattern, forming a path about 800 meters long near the north coast of Bimini. The individual blocks measure on average 2 to 3 meters wide, some reaching up to 4 meters, with thicknesses of half a meter or more. They look like slabs polished by time, fitted together as if they were the ruins of an ancient pier, a seawall, or a forgotten causeway. When the news came to light, many pointed out something interesting. Decades earlier, in 1938, the famous American psychic Edgar Cayce had released one of his enigmatic prophecies. A portion of the temples of Atlantis will rise from beneath the waters near Bimini in 1968 or 1969. Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, claimed to enter a trance and obtain visions of ancient civilizations. His followers had waited patiently for the indicated date, and for them, the finding of the Bimini Road was nothing less than the confirmation of that prediction. According to this esoteric interpretation, those submerged stones would be the remains of Atlantis, the legendary island continent that, according to Plato, disappeared under the sea in a single night. The temporal coincidence, discovered just in 1968, fueled the aura of mystery and turned Bimini into a place of pilgrimage for explorers of the unknown. Since its discovery, it has been the subject of intense study and debate among scientists and enthusiasts. Geologists and underwater archaeologists have dived repeatedly in the area, mapping not only the main causeway but also two smaller, parallel formations located closer to the shore. These secondary alignments, about 50 to 60 meters long each, are composed of smaller blocks, 1 to 2 meters, and are located at a similar depth, which suggests they could be part of the same structural complex. The blocks of the main road have edges rounded by erosion, covered in algae and coral. Some fit together at almost right angles, while others are slightly separated with sand filling the gaps. The impression at first glance is certainly that of a cobbled road. The first hypotheses pointed to a human construction, perhaps made by some unknown pre-Columbian culture or even by navigators from the Old World, long before Columbus. However, The scientific explanation points to the limestone of Bimini, which is a type of rock that forms on beaches when sand and pieces of shells that have a lot of calcium gradually stick together and harden over time, as if the sea and sun cemented them naturally. That rock is called beach rock. Sometimes this rock cracks on its own in a very orderly manner with straight lines that cross, forming figures like squares or rectangles. That is why it looks like someone cut and arranged the blocks. But in reality, it is a work of nature. Afterward, the sea and currents can move or uncover those blocks, making them look like a road or a floor made by people. In Tasmania, there is a place called the tessellated pavement, which is a perfect example. It looks like a patio with cobblestones, but no one made it. It is a natural formation. Many geologists consider the Bimini Road to be a similar case, a formation of fractured beach rock that casually adopts an orderly appearance. For their part, proponents of the artificial theory argue that the linear distribution and the similarity in block size are difficult to explain solely with random natural fractures. Likewise, some reports claim to have found under certain blocks what seem to be logs or organic remains, possible tools or scaffolding that could be dated, although these findings have not been published in scientific journals. Gregory Little, a researcher who has extensively explored the Bimini Road, has suggested that it could be the pier or breakwater of an ancient coastal settlement now submerged. According to his view, ancient American cultures or even transoceanic visitors, the Phoenicians, have been mentioned in more adventurous theories could have erected that structure towards the 2nd millennium BC, when the sea level was slightly lower than today, and those rocks could have been at the water's edge. To this day, there is no definitive consensus. Officially, most geologists lean toward a natural origin, while some independent archaeologists and mystery enthusiasts keep the flame of the incredible alive. The possibility of finding the remains of a mythical underwater city. The Antikythera Mechanism. In 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers from the island of Symi set sail in search of natural sponges through the Aegean Sea. It was a hard and dangerous trade that sometimes led divers to find more than marine fauna in the depths. At the end of that year, near a steep island called Antikythera, between Kythera and Crete, one of the divers surfaced terrified, saying that at the bottom, at about 45 meters, he had seen corpses of men and horses everywhere. Alarmed but curious, Captain Dimitrios Kontos decided to investigate. It turned out the diver had stumbled upon the remains of an ancient Roman shipwreck scattered on the seabed. By the spring of the following year, 1901, the waters allowed for the resumption of dives, and the divers began to extract all kinds of treasures from the wreck: magnificently preserved bronze and marble statues, amphorae, jewelry, vases, coins, and much more. The Greek government, upon learning of this, sent the ship Myron with archaeologists to assist in the recovery. And among the objects rescued were also pieces of rotten wood and a shapeless mass of corroded, brittle bronze that ended up deposited in the crates of the National Archaeological Museum of Athens without attracting too much attention, at least until months later, on the 17th of May 1902, when the archaeologist Valerios Stais was examining the artifacts from the Antikythera wreck and noticed that green-gray lump that looked like just a rock. Upon bringing it to the light, he distinguished something amazing embedded in it: a bronze gear with perfectly formed teeth. Stais was stunned. It looked like a clockwork mechanism, but one that should be over 2,000 years old. He immediately conjectured that it could be some kind of ancient astronomical clock. This object had already broken into several fragments by this point, revealing toothed wheels, solar gears, and remains of tiny inscriptions engraved on the plates. For decades, the artifact remained an enigma. It was not until the 1950s and 70s that the British physicist Derek J. de Sola Price conducted detailed studies with X-rays, revealing the internal design and proposing its astronomical function, which was basically confirmed with subsequent high-resolution analyses. Today, this is known as the Antikythera Mechanism, and it is nothing more and nothing less than the first analog computer in known history. It was built by Greek scientists near the 1st century BC, and its complexity is so surprising that we would not find anything similar until 1,600 years later in the development of astronomical clocks in medieval Europe. The mechanism itself was housed in a wooden box the size of a shoebox, about 34 centimeters by 18 by 9. Inside, an incredibly intricate system of at least 30 bronze-toothed wheels geared to reproduce astronomical movements. The fragments found total 82 pieces, although only 7 of these contain mechanical parts or legible inscriptions. The largest wheel, 14 centimeters in diameter and with 223 teeth, probably represented the Metonic cycle, a 19-year period after which the phases of the moon repeat on the same dates. With a set of hands and scales today, virtually reconstructed, the mechanism allowed for the prediction of the positions of the sun and the moon in the zodiac, lunar phases, and solar and lunar eclipses with remarkable precision. It even had an indicator for dates of sporting events, as it marked the dates of the main Pan-Hellenic Games, including the ancient Olympics, in a 4-year cycle. That is, it combined a civil calendar, an astronomical one, and a ritual one in a single device. The astonishing sophistication of the Antikythera Mechanism changed our understanding of ancient engineering, because before its discovery, no one imagined that the Hellenistic Greeks had reached such a level of skill in precision mechanics. However, classical texts already offered some clues, since Cicero, writing in the 1st century BC, mentioned that Archimedes and other sages built spheres that showed the movement of the sky. After Antikythera, those references made more sense, and in fact, it is believed that this device could have been the work of the school of Posidonius on Rhodes, perhaps even designed by the astronomer Hipparchus or some artisan of that same line, and that it was aboard a Roman ship to be taken to Rome, possibly as war booty or a commission for a nobleman. The shipwreck, dated near 70 or 60 BC, truncated its journey, sinking it along with its statues and riches, and there it remained for nearly 2,000 years until it was found. The deciphered inscriptions seem to be a kind of abbreviated instruction manual, explaining what each dial shows. This indicates that users could read the date of upcoming eclipses, the lunar phase on a given date, and know in which year the Olympic Games would be held, all just by turning some cranks. Indeed, it was an astronomical machine, a marvel of miniaturization with functions similar to a desktop planetarium. In 2005, very precise 3D tomography even revealed previously invisible characters and allowed for even more faithful modern recreations. Today, experts have built functional replicas. By turning the crank, the needles that indicate the position of the sun and the moon in the firmament move. The lunar phases change on a 2-colored disk, and indicators for eclipses and calendars move on the back. Each gear has a specific number of teeth to achieve the desired mathematical ratio. For example, 223 teeth against 54 on another gear implement the Saros cycle. One can only marvel at the skill of those watchmakers in antiquity. And perhaps the most interesting thing is that the mere existence of this artifact raises several questions. How many other similar inventions were lost over time? What brilliant mind conceived it? And how was that knowledge transmitted? Sadly, we do not know of another copy for now. Perhaps most were destroyed or lost with time. The fragments of the mechanism are today displayed in a glass case in the Athens Museum. It is at once an object of science and a profound mystery, almost as much as the sea itself. Thank you for subscribing, leaving your like, and following us on social media. I hope you have enjoyed these maritime mysteries. Without further ado, I bid you farewell. See you next time.